We've had a great week learning about leadership. And today we have an excellent panel, people who are leaders in your lives, people who speak into your lives, people who you really don't need me to introduce, but I'm going to introduce to you anyway. Let's give a good round of welcome to your Women's Resident Director, Ms. Sue Fushpanski. Another warm welcome to Dr. Cecilio Hernandez. And rounding off our panel, your own Dr. Quackenbush. One of the things I love about leadership is that God has created lots of different people and lots of different types of people. If you look around you, you're going to see a diverse group. And as you look around the world, you're going to see a diverse group. And different types of people are going to need different types of leaders. God created you just the way that He wanted to. God created you in His image, and there's going to be lots of different types of leaders. There's no one type. God can use you just as He made you, in your personality, with your likes and your dislikes, and all that is you. God can use you to lead all different types of people. And there's some interesting people out there. I've seen them. So let's get into some questions here. And I'm going to point this to begin with Dr. Quackenbush. And so on Tuesday, Pastor Ryan Seller talked about leading with consistency. All right, Dr. Quackenbush, I want to lead with you here. Can you give us some examples of consistency or inconsistency with leadership in the places that you've served?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? It's warmer in here today. Yeah, you can feel that, yeah. The warmth is coming. Consistency. I think that it's very important for a leader to, in terms of their temperament, if you're rather moody, like kind of you have up days and kind of down days, that can be a challenge for those that are following you because they kind of don't know which personality they're going to get. Not that you have a split personality, but they don't know what kind of leader they're going to get that day. As much even keel as you can be, as much the same you can be in terms of your temperament, that's a real benefit for those that are following you. And I think also, I think in terms of inconsistency, an example of that, I served with a pastor. I served with 6 different pastors, and I'm not going to take a deep dive into their leadership, and most of them are just amazing leaders. But there's one particular that was pretty consistent in inconsistency. In other words, they were consistently changing the target that I, as at that time a music director, was trying to hit. And about the time I would feel like I was like hitting the target that had been established for the church, it would change. But I wouldn't know it was changing until I got called into his office and was very much made aware that the target had changed. Because he was very much influenced by other ministries. He was influenced by just different churches and their style of worship. And so what made it difficult is that there was not a process in the change. And I feel like the mission of a church, it's different than a vision. A mission of a church, just like the mission of this college, it's 100 years. We're in our 101st year, I guess, or 101st year would be a better way to say it, of one vision, right? A very clear vision. But the vision, or the mission, but the vision can change. A vision is how the mission is accomplished. That's why churches will have a Vision Sunday, but probably not. They shouldn't have a Mission Sunday because the mission really is given to us in Matthew 28, right? To go make disciples in all nations. And a good leader will, when there is change, will do that in a collaborative way. Will share what's in the heart, visionary of the visionary and bring people around a table, so to speak, and talk about the implementation. First of all, the validity of the vision, and then the implementation of the vision, and bring the leaders that are serving under the pastoral leadership to bring them into a commonality of purpose. And here's what we're doing together, instead of top-down leadership. This is, here's my vision, go do it. There's nothing more discouraging for an associate pastor than to just be handed a vision, say, go do it. But if you can bring those that are on your team along with you, and that they own the vision, then it's a win, and they're going to have ownership of it. They're going to have buy-in because you're leading in a consistent way. And so I don't want to say that an inconsistent leader doesn't have like fresh ideas, because they should have fresh ideas, but it's how those are implemented and basically administrated and adjudicated almost and evaluated that's so important. So,
thank you. Let me just make a comment on what you were saying with mission and vision. I think sometimes in the books I've read or the leadership conferences I've gone to, there's sometimes confusion about mission versus vision. Some people will say a mission statement when they mean a vision statement, or a vision statement when they mean a mission statement. But there is a difference, and I think what Dr. Quackenbush said is correct. The mission is the solid. The mission can't stand or can't change. The mission really should align with what Jesus came to do, and that is what? To seek and to save that which was lost. And so this idea of evangelism and reaching the unsaved for Christ, that has to be something that your church really never changes on. But the vision, that's what it looks like. How do we go about achieving this? And this is going to be done in different ways. The way that Teen Challenge accomplishes the mission of Christ might be different than the way that Convoy of Hope accomplishes the mission. And so how you go about doing those things will certainly change. It'll change in your context. It'll change what part of the world you're in. It'll change in the era in which you're living. You know, the mission of reaching the lost is the same now as it was 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. That hasn't changed. But the way we go about doing that, that's the vision. That certainly will change from time and place. Very good, thank you. Either of our other two panelists, times in which you have experienced consistency from a leader, or inconsistency, or maybe even just some of the importances of being consistent in leadership.
Sure, thank you. I think one of the issues that happens with leaders who are inconsistent is that they lose the respect of the people they lead. And once you lose the respect of the people that you lead, then it is difficult. You may have the greatest vision, mission, but if people can't follow you because you're not a consistent person, then it's not going to work. And I think it just, so being on the side of a follower, for example, if my leader is not consistent, then it creates a problem for me to respect that person and to follow that person. Now, we have people who, you know, their way of thinking is they could be everywhere. For some of us who are more logical thinking, we you know, B comes after A and then is C. It's very difficult to follow someone who's not consistent. It just doesn't work with the way that you're wired, basically. So it is a major problem when leaders are not consistent. You lose the respect of the people that you're working with.
Yeah, for those of you who have had me in preparing for academic success and had Dr. Howe talk about personality types, sometimes the way we go about accomplishing goals can be different. Some people just love a disorganized chaos, and that's how they thrive. But some people are much more logical, step one, step two, step three. Self-awareness, though, says that you need to know who God created you to be, because there are going to be people that you're leading that don't work well that way. And there's going to be certainly conflict and miscommunication. So as long as you can figure out this is who God created me to be, and this is how then I need, you also need to learn who did God create your people to be? The leaders that are under you, or if you are a leader under a leader, okay, how has God wired that leader? And how has God wired me? And are those two, is there potential conflict there? All right, you could probably save yourself a lot of hassle by understanding how God has wired people and then find a way to work with that. Because I do believe that God creates us intentionally who we are, puts us where we need to be for that season, and we can move and work and thrive in that. But it certainly does take a little bit of work. All right, let's move on to something that Pastor Stewart said. He talked about being a leader that edifies others. And Pastor Schmidt also talked about being a leader who listens. I think if there's anyone on this platform that listens well and is an encourager, I think Sister Sue is that person. And so, Sister Sue, could you please speak a little bit about listening and about edifying others and how that impacts leadership?
I just want to say I'm just honored to be here, and I don't always do this as best as I can, but I pray that I think about listening as far as not just hearing the words. How many times I've had different ladies, even staff, or even myself maybe on the couch with the staff. Sometimes we're saying one thing, but there's something else happening in our heart. And I'm always saying, Holy Spirit, show me what's behind the scenes. Sometimes it's not what it seems. And sometimes we think we're going through something, but it's really not that issue, right? We've been there? And I think that if we can lead that way by saying, Holy Spirit, just direct us so that we would listen. Sometimes we're ready to fix somebody, and I can struggle with that too. I want to be the fixer, but sometimes it's just to listen, because sometimes we get done with the conversation, we're like, wow, it's nothing what we started. The person says it's nothing that I was thinking when I came in here, but now we're hearing the person. We're hearing them. And I really believe that comes from sitting in his presence, sitting at his feet, and listening in his presence, and knowing his voice. Like, do we know his voice? Do we know what the Holy Spirit is saying? Or are we just coming to fix? Yeah, Lord, that we would just sit in your presence and listen to what's happening. And then when we get out of there, we're like, wow, it's like heaven reached earth today, because God met us in this place. And whatever was happening, we left it at the door. We moved on. And I think if we can walk in that. You mentioned the encouraging too, or, okay. The encouraging part, I thought about David, right? He's in the field. What is he doing? He's encouraging himself in the Lord. He's spending time in God's presence. He's seeking him. He's worshiping God. And I believe out of that is how we can lead. If we come and we're encouraging, but we're not believing it ourselves, if we don't have encouragement ourselves, how can we encourage? So I think like David, he encouraged himself in the Lord and spent that time in God's presence. And out of that, we can say, hey, God he took care of the bear, he took care of the lion, and this Goliath is nothing because our God did it. So it's kind of like the encouragement comes out of remembering what God did. Every day I remember where God brought me from. Every day I remember where God rescued me from. And out of that, I can encourage others and say, look what the Lord has done. So I think out of leadership, we have to first be encouraged by the Lord before we can give anything, because then it's just words. It has to be real to us first. That was helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of listening, that's really good. We appreciate you so much, Sue, and what you bring on the team here. I think that when it comes to listening and like building a staff, some of you are going to go on to be lead pastors, and you'll be in the selection process of building a staff. There's so many different philosophies in how to do that. There are some that want to bring on what they call green staff, inexperienced staff, that basically they want to shape that young staff member they want to shape and mold them into the image of what would be a prototypical staff member at that church. And a pastor that has that philosophy oftentimes doesn't really want to listen to the young staff. They just want to tell them, this is how you should be, this is what you should do, this is our philosophy. We didn't bring you here to think, really, just to carry out our plan. Now, they're not going to say that, but that's really how they're going to go about the business of being a senior pastor. There are others that want to build a staff with people that are actually smarter than them. I remember Andy Stanley at a Catalyst conference several years ago in Atlanta was talking about how he builds a staff and even the board of trustees that he has. He goes, I want to be like the dumbest person at the table. I want to have staff around me that are sharp, that can bring fresh ideas. And if I have a visionary concept that I want to bring to the table, I want the people around me, the men and women around me, to be bright and sharp and be able to solidify and to sharpen that visionary idea, so it's going to be a win-win. And so, again, some of you are going to choose the philosophy of the leadership, and I just encourage you to choose the latter, not the former, because it allows people around you to feel a sense of contribution, and it's not just the pastor's church, but it's our church under the lordship of Jesus Christ. And if you value people and empower them and listen to their ideas, it's just going to make your leadership stronger. But if you're of the ilk that's going to just want to tell people what they should do and how they should do it, then it's never going to go past your vision and your abilities and your skill set. It's going to be very limited if you have that philosophy, and I've seen that. A pastor that I heard of, at one point he wanted to bring like the best staff members from all over the country onto his staff, but then when he did that, he brought people from East and West Coast to this Midwest church, and when he did that, he would get pushback sometimes on ideas that he had, and he didn't like that. And so after about 4 or 5 years, he ended up clearing out the staff that he had brought in, and he just said, I'm just going to hire green, inexperienced people, and I'm going to make them like I want them to be. And so he got what he got, right? But anyway, you have that choice to make in how you're going to build a team, and then ultimately how you're going to value and listen to them. And so anyway.
Just one further thought on this line of, and we'll get into more developing leaders here in a minute with one of our topics, but the main difference, or a main difference, between leadership that is spiritual and leadership that is not, is that money's not the bottom line. You need money, but your goal is to lead people, and that's not only your congregants, but it's also the people that are on your team. And so one of the things about spiritual leadership is that your job is to help that person get to where God wants them to be. And so you need to be a secure leader. If you have future senior pastors that you're leading and they are serving as staff pastors, then you need to do your job as a shepherd and help them become the kind of person that can lead a church. You don't need to be afraid that they're going to come and take your job. All right, if that happens, God will deal with them, and God will take care of those things in his own way. But you need to be the kind of person that is encouraging and building up your team, because you are stronger when they are stronger. You are going to be better off whenever they are better off. And your goal is to lead people, not to make yourself look good. Leadership is not about you. All right, leadership in the kingdom is about the kingdom. It is about the king. And so you need to steward well those that are put in your care, and you need to help them become what God has called them to be. And so encouragement and listening are certainly going to play a role in that. Yes, please.
There's been times when I'm sitting in my office dealing with whatever I'm dealing with, and I'll get a text or some message from Sister Sue, and it's an encouraging word. That has had a major impact on my day. It has really changed my view on my day and what's going on. I remember when I was pastoring, sitting in my office, being frustrated about whatever situation was going on, and just receiving an encouraging text from someone from the church who gave you a word that you needed, and it's like, I could do nothing else but just look at heaven and thank God for that message in that moment, and just simply write back, you don't know how much this means to me right now. Because, we go through struggles in different situations, and it's amazing that God will instruct somebody to send someone else an encouraging text message. But that also requires that you and I are open to the Spirit, right? Right. When the Spirit is moving us, put someone in your mind that you listen to that, and just make sure that you do send out that message.
There's an old phrase, I say it's old because I remember it when I was a kid. The beatings will continue till morale improves, right? A team that is defeated won't win. If they believe in their minds and their hearts that they can't win, they won't even try. But a team that believes that they can, that has the encouragement and the support of their leader, can do incredible things. If you look at history and some of the battles that have been fought, the biggest army doesn't always win. The strongest army doesn't always win. Sports will tell you that, all right? The Yankees lost, all right? Were they the best team? Maybe, but they didn't win. So anything can happen on any given Sunday. Any team can pull out the win, but it's usually the team that believes they can the most. And so let that be true of your team as you are leading it. Let's talk a little bit about pastoral leadership transition and then leaving a legacy. So what does it mean to transition from one role of leadership to the next, even to hand off leadership from one leader to another, and leaving a legacy then? Who would like to take this one?
I'll start.
All right.
Because I went through a transition a couple years ago. When you ask someone about the definition of leadership, usually the word influence comes along. It's the first thing that comes to our mind. Leadership is influence. And that's okay. I'm not a big fan of that definition because we've had some really bad people in the world that had a lot of bad influence over people that have done pretty nasty things, right? I prefer to think of leaders as making other people shine. That's good. You know, making other people shine. And one of my principles as a leader has been work yourself out of a job to provide an opportunity for somebody else. So a number of years ago, 2019, 2020, my wife and I are in Israel, and during our trip, we're really beginning to think about what's our next step. We were both feeling that our time at the church was there, that we needed to transition. Now this was probably around our 19th year as lead pastors there, and I had been working with someone at our church who's actually the lead pastor now, a woman who took over the church. You know, throughout, she worked with me as an associate pastor for about 16 years, and during that time, my goal was to work with that person to make sure that, you know, she would be ready when I stepped out. Now, obviously, that was like a step of faith, because ultimately it's the church who was going to elect the person. But my wife and I had decided that we were going to give the church 5 more years, and during that time, we would transition. Now, about a year and a half before we transitioned, I had a conversation with my board. They needed to know first that this was what we were planning to do. And then about a year into our transition, we formed a church. And one of the things that we were doing was teaching the church during this process of the blessings in a transition. Because I think people often, I mean, we were there for 24 years when we left as lead pastors, and people develop relationships with you, and some people think that it's the end of the church when you leave, but it's not. I mean, it's not my church. It's God's church, right? So just taking the time to prepare the person who you like to become the next leader of the church, but also preparing the board and preparing the church and looking at for a year, whether it was through preaching or just Bible studies, that there is a blessing, that great things could take place out of my mind was to be the next leader. And for me, purposely, I wanted a woman to lead the church. So that worked out.
Good. Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on transitional leadership?
I think one of the greatest gifts that a church leader can give a congregation, and whether it's a senior pastor or, say, a worship arts pastor, youth pastor, is the gift of a seamless transition. It's not a drop a mic on your last Sunday and and walk out the door like you don't care, but it's handing off the microphone and really just reaching out to someone who will continue to carry the mission of the church forward that you have developed, and that there's a level of trust that's already been established, ideally. As you probably know some of the story, back in 2013, my wife and I and Ryan Seller, who was here earlier this week, and his future wife, our daughter, and a few other people, about 50 other people, on a launch team, started Anchor Church in Boston. And we got to about the year 9, and we could see year 10 going. At one point, when we started the church, I was thinking, I'll go till age 70, because 70 is like the new 60, right? And so I thought, with God's help, we could do that. But the congregation was such a young demographic, a lot of young married couples and families and college students, that I thought they needed younger leadership earlier than what I had first thought. And so about year 9, I started having conversations with Ryan Seller, who was our associate pastor all those years. He had led small group ministry and the music ministry, and just did a lot of associate task and filled that role beautifully. And I started talking to him about maybe a transition for him to be the next senior pastor, and he really resisted that. He was not interested in that at all. He had just finished his master's degree in leadership, and really was applying and was really looking toward working in the corporate world in consulting and all. And so he was not interested at all, as I mentioned. And so every now and then I'd ask him how the application process was going. And he goes, "Oh, not very good." So it's so competitive and I can't even get an interview. And I would just jokingly say, "Well, you know why? Because you're supposed to be the next pastor at Anchor Church." And he would roll his eyes and, get nothing back from him. We'd just go on talking about other stuff. And then I'd check in, in another month or two. "How's it going?" "Oh, not very good." And, "Well, you know why?" And so finally, we had a little Saturday morning family breakfast. And we had talked earlier that week, Ryan and I, on a Tuesday, about we'd had one of those why conversations. And as he was pulling out of the parking lot after the breakfast, he put his window down. He said, "I've been really thinking about what you said, and I'm praying about it." And that led to he and Lauren coming and just sharing that they feel that the Lord is leading them, and it wasn't because he couldn't get another job, but because God put that in his heart to be. And he started having a fresh vision for the future of the church, and so we started talking about that. That was in basically early summer of 22, I guess it would have been. And so in the fall of, actually August of 22, sat down with the board and told the board that we felt that it was time to transition, that we weren't getting any younger, and that it was just time. At that point, we'd been in full-time vocational ministry for 42 years, and was just feeling a release from that church ministry. And I said, "I feel like we have the next pastor here among us, and that's Pastor Ryan." And I said, "But we want to do this the right way." And so we brought on a consultant that wasn't a part of Anchor that helped walk the church through the transition, especially the board. And also the board interviewed Ryan, with me present, but interviewed Ryan on 2 different board meetings and really just drilled down on his philosophy of ministry, how he envisioned the future of the church. And I was there, not as his father-in-law, but I was there because I was still the caretaker of the mission of the church. I wasn't going to walk out the door in the interview process like I was not involved and I didn't care. And so, but I was silent. I just listened. And so after those 2, that was in September, October. In November, the board was ready to basically vote on whether Ryan would be put forward to the congregation as the candidate for the pastoral role. They unanimously voted to proceed. And so in November, with the holidays coming, I simply told the congregation of the plan that Shelley and my plan to step down in the coming year, that we felt like we had the next pastor among us, and that was Pastor Ryan, and just asked him to pray for through the holidays. So there were basically 2 months that went by where they just prayed. There was no interview with the congregation. Interview with the board had ceased, and just to pray. Then we came back in January, February, a couple dates where we had a Q&A with the congregation and a fellowship time afterward. And so they could ask any question they wanted of Ryan. He would share maybe 10, 15 minutes, sometimes a little longer than that, on the vision he had for the future of the church, and then open up to a Q&A. So again, the process, me and Ryan, and then really me and the board, then Ryan and the board, and then Ryan and the congregation. And then at the end of February last year, they were able to vote. And you never know what's going to happen when you put a ballot in somebody's hand. It's secret ballot, and yet there was a 100% vote. It was very united. And the church has been blessed in the transition. There's been no hiccups, nothing weird that's happened. It's been very smooth, and we give God the glory. But that was the best thing I could do for Anchor Church. It wasn't a great thing to start the church, right? Anybody can start a church, but to give them the gift of maybe the next 10 to 15 years, the Lord willing, of leadership, that was the best gift as the founding pastor I could ever give them. So it's kind of, I took a little time to talk about that, but I hope you took notes on that, because a lot of you are going to be in that position one day. And again, think about the greatest gift you could give your congregation. And that, I think, if it's not the top, it's close to the top of the list. So anyway.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about transparency in a leader. What does it mean to be, or to have transparency in a leader? I'm going to look, Sue, why don't you take us on this one?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just wanted to share that I kind of grew up under leadership that wasn't transparent. It was very like us and them, and I'm probably more transparent than most people, as you guys know. But I think I learned the opposite, so that now I bring transparency, that I'm quick. I probably asked every one of you to forgive me in this room at one point. I have no problem saying I'm wrong. I've made a mistake. I think as leaders we need to say we could miss something. I think that allows others to see that, hey, I can make mistakes too. I mean, we're not, it's a relationship that we need to learn and grow. I'm growing every day. I'm learning. I've been with the Lord over 40 years, but I'm still learning every day things that I need to learn. And I think if we bring that to others, just saying, hey, I was wrong, or hey, I think of Isaiah, woe is me, for I am undone. We need to stay in that posture before the Lord, and then we're able to recognize that we have never arrived in ourselves, but we can communicate to other people, I'm there for you, let's, share different things. But I think that's so important to not, I've seen a lot of insecure leadership that have led out of not letting anyone see them. And it's been an insecurity because they're afraid if anybody really sees them, they've lost some kind of image. But I think if we can just let that down and realize that all of us are at the foot of the cross, none of us have arrived, none of us have got to that place, but that's the transparency. You know, I'm quick to share my testimony at different times with people. I don't forget what God's done. I don't stay there. I don't pitch a tent there. But we also use what God's done in our life, that there's no shame to go back and say, God brought me out of this, but look what he's doing today. And I think that's so important to be transparent. Hope that answers the question.
Anyone else want to add to that? I will say, though, you do need to find a line between leadership and transparency, because you can't be best friends with your congregants. You know, it's hard to lead someone and then be their best friend as well. And so that's why the people around you right now are so vitally important. You're going to need ministry partners, ministry pastors in ministry, friends in ministry that you're going to be able to talk to. You can't, you know, if you're honestly struggling with something, if you're honestly dealing with an issue, you can't just go and tell a congregant that. That's probably not going to go very well. And so you need to be able to have good men and for men, good women for women that you can talk to, that you can have confidences with, be held accountable to, so that you can, you know, because you need friendship. You need to be able to do that. And there's right places and wrong places for that.
Ben, if I could just add,
Sure.
Professor Phillips, if I could just add to that, there was a Lifeway research that had come out recently, and I don't remember the exact percentage, but a fairly large percent of pastors feel isolated. And because of that, they're stressed out. And part of that is that we don't necessarily have friends. Pastors don't, you know, if you ask me, you know, can you tell me who your friends are? It's hard to tell who our friends are. And certainly in a church setting, it's even more difficult. So it is so crucial to develop those relationships with people, other mentors and other ministers, where you could come and be open about how you're feeling that day, right? Without the fear of feeling judged, or people thinking that you're, geez, he's less spiritual than I thought, and he's my pastor. Because, you know, we're human beings. We go through situations. I've said a number of times here, 2020 was a very tough year for my family. So we go through struggles, and sometimes it is difficult to express those things or have conversations with people in our churches.
Thank you. And for the record, you can call me Ben anytime you need to or want to. Go ahead.
Yeah, growing up in a pastor's home, Assemblies of God pastor's home, and then my wife also growing up in a pastor's home. My dad went to Central Bible College, and Shelley's father went to Southwestern, at that point, Bible College. And hearing them talk about some of the things that they were taught in Bible college was very consistent, and in the respect of they were counseled very strongly. Don't get close to your congregants. Don't get close to the people in your congregation because they will hurt you. And so my generation, though, we reacted against that because, first of all, Jesus got really close to his disciples, and yes, he was hurt, but that's the Jesus way of leadership, is to get close. Now, I agree with what Professor Ben shared about there needs to be some wisdom there, and certainly some things that should not be shared or divulged with members of the congregation. But I don't see any other way to lead people without knowing them and empathizing with them and celebrating with them and laughing with them and letting them see that you are a human being, that you have strengths and weaknesses, that you have a sense of humor, that there are hobbies that you might enjoy sharing with another congregant. And besides golf. I mean, there's golf, but there's other things too. And I just feel like it's not appropriate for us to tell you know, set a wall up with you and the congregation, because Jesus didn't do that. And no matter what a professor says, whatever generation, we have to look at Jesus. And, you know, yeah, he was crucified by some of the very people that he led into his inner circle, a.k.a. Judas, right? But he still loved Judas, I feel like, up until the very end. And so, anyway, that's just about transparency and closeness to a congregation. Just something that, again, my generation looked at it differently, and fortunately, you don't hear that here. I don't think from anyone. So,
all right, good, thank you. We've already touched on this a little bit, but last major topic of conversation is developing leaders. And so, is there anything anyone wants to add to leadership development, and what is the importance of developing leaders in your congregation?
Sure. So I've said that my personal definition of leadership is, you know, making other people shine. And my goal has been to work myself out of a job. And I've, you know, for many, many years, you know, I've been a pastor for 35 years, and for probably about 25 of those years, I was bivocational. So I've worked with nonprofit organizations. And as someone, I also have the privilege of being part of the Southern New England Ministry Network board. So we approve your credentialing when you apply for a minister. But one of the things that I've seen in my years there, about 7 or 8 years now, is that a lot of pastors wait until it's late to transition out, and unfortunately, there hasn't been any leadership development happening in the church. And many pastors overstay their time in a church, and it's even more complicated when they didn't have the wisdom to develop leaders. So for me, developing leaders within the church has been something that was important, was key, was crucial. And in my church in Lowell, for example, my leadership development program, sometimes they call it a leadership pipeline, was not just to develop leaders that could work within the church, but I also focus on developing leaders that could represent our church within the community. So I thought of, how do I prepare leaders in my congregation that could sit on the boards of different nonprofits in the city and be that light in the midst of all the different things that happen within the city. So being intentional about developing leaders is crucial. You don't have to fear that. You know, God has, you know, I used to tell leaders in our church that there were plenty of leaders who are gifted in areas that I was not gifted in. And I was not insecure because of that. I praise God that He gave us all the different giftings. You know, I thank God for my wife. I'm a very quiet, laid-back, serious person. I don't like to be in front of people. My wife is just a laughter. I mean, she's outgoing, and we're totally opposite. And I thank God for that, because if the world was according to me, it would be a very boring world. But thank God that she's different. So thank God that people in our congregations are different, that they have different skill sets. They're able to handle things differently, and it should not cost the lead pastor any insecurities, but rather really take advantage of that and promote that.
I think there's two types of leadership in a church. There's personality-driven and team-driven. A personality-driven leadership is it really revolves around one personality, one person. The problem with that is when that personality leaves, even if they go on vacation, or say they do leave the church, they resign. If the ministry's been so wrapped around that one personality, it's going to be a shock to the congregation, to the community. But if there's been a team approach, whether it's in preaching or in worship leading, then there's a smooth transition. Years ago, I learned that the need to develop other worship leaders in the ministry I was at, initially it was because, well, when I was on vacation, I wanted the worship ministry to continue as if I was there. That was kind of my initial thought. But then, in the sense of raising up other leaders that could serve on any given Sunday, there'd be Sundays that, because of raising up other leaders, I would be maybe on the front row, just worshiping, and our team was led by trained, leaders that we had developed, and the ministry had continuity, a consistency to it. And then when I left, one particular church, that ministry just carried on. Because they had, several worship leaders. And I think also there's validity to a preaching team for that same reason. If you have 2 or 3 other people that you're rotating in, that are preaching, that are building rapport with a congregation, in that day that you will leave, because nobody pastors forever. You could die in the pulpit, but then there's the next Sunday, unless the Lord returns. And so there's going to be a next leader. And if there's a team approach, then it's going to be better for the congregation. There's going to be a familiarity, a rapport, a consistency, and they're going to be blessed as a result. But if it's wrapped around a dynamic personality and that's it, then that's a deep dive off of a cliff after that. So.
All right, thank you. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions from the student body. Matt, do you have a microphone perhaps that we could use, or I'll run this one around. Do we have any questions for our panel? Yes. It's all right. I need you to need a mic.
How young, or how many years after graduating Bible college or your master's do you think is the right time to lead a church? Or how much experience do you think you need in order to lead a church, in order for your congregants to because you're too young, and then your congregants are you don't have enough experience, or you're younger than all, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay, praise God.
Here's my simple experience. I think that God is going to lead each of you in different paths. I wish I had been humble enough to be I don't say a runner-up, to be an assistant pastor. But I think whenever I was younger, I wasn't even looking for such a position. So God taught me lessons. I started senior pastoring when I was 27 years old. And I was probably still way too young. I went through Northpoint. I went through 3 years of seminary, and I started pastoring. And I was the youngest person in the congregation, apart from my wife. And I remember, coming to that realization, I am the youngest person here. And that was a struggle for me. And then at one point, God said, are you going to get over yourself or what? He just kind of one Monday morning kind of had to slap me upside the head and say, I don't care that you're that young. Why do you care that you're that young? Get up and go to work. And so there was lots of other lessons he taught me in that. But, God will lead you. But if you have the opportunity to sit under someone and be mentored, absolutely be mentored, because you're going to learn more by having a godly pastor, godly male or female pastor, whatever the Lord should lead you in, to learn with that. And, there's nothing wrong with starting off that way. I think I wish I would have, because I think I would have probably been that much more effective in my ministry if I had been able to sit under someone. So there's not a right or wrong age. I think it has to do with maturity. Where are you at spiritually? Where are your skills at as a leader? And can you handle the pressures and stresses of being the one in charge? And I will say, there is a value in not having leadership. Meaning, When you're the one in charge, it's a lot different. That spiritual weight, that spiritual mantle that gets put on, you can't anticipate that until you're the one in charge. And so a lot of students, I know whenever I was a student, everyone was just itching to be the pastor like I was. And then when you get there and you realize, oh, wow, this isn't quite what I expected it to be. If I had maybe, instead of just diving head into the pool, if I had maybe gotten in a little bit slower by means of an associate pastorate, I probably would have learned things differently. But that was the path that the Lord took me on. And so I don't say it's not an age thing as much as it is a spiritual maturity and even a leadership maturity thing. But if God can use me, God can use anybody. Yes.
I would just add that I would say 10 years. And you're like, 10 years? That's like forever. But I think in retrospect, 10 years out as an associate, it could be 7 or 8 for some. It could be 11 or 12 for others, but the point is, give yourself time vocationally, to develop, because there's so many experiences that we try to cover as many as we can here, but a lot of it's theory, right? A lot of it's theory. Then you get out in the real world and you try some of the theory, and so you have to adapt depending on culture, context, all of this. The other thing I would say is make your intentions clear to, if you go into a church as an associate pastor, even if it's to be a youth pastor, but you feel God has called you at some point down the road to be a lead pastor, I would encourage you to make that clear to the senior pastor that you're working with. And say, I realize this time in my life, I'm a youth pastor. I'm very fulfilled doing that, but I would like to be trained. I'd like for you to mentor me. So when that day comes, whenever that is down the road, that if I could sit in on a board meeting sometimes and just, if you could give me opportunities to be exposed to some of the things that a senior pastor is exposed to and does, then that would really help me in my preparation. And I think if you have the right pastor, they will just take you under their wing and they will mentor you and help you to be ready. So have that conversation early on with the pastor. And they shouldn't feel threatened by it. If they do, then you may have the wrong pastor to work with.
All right, thank you. I got one more question, and then I'm going to bring this to an end to respect everyone's time.
Thank you. So you kind of mentioned mentorship in a way. So I wanted to know if you guys could go more into that of how does that play a role, and then also how to look for a good mentor per se, and what should we be looking for in that sense?
First of all, in selecting someone, and that is a mentee, it's kind of a funny word, but that's what they call those that are being mentored. A mentee takes the initiative, okay? So that's number one. The second thing is look for a pastor that personifies the values that you have, that you resonate with their style of ministry and the depth of their ministry, their philosophy of ministry, and then approach them and ask if they would mentor you, and then be specific in the things that you would like to be mentored in. It could be preaching. It could be that plus organizational leadership in a church. Whatever you want to grow in, be specific, and then set up some regular meetings with them. Usually it's over coffee, but I think that's it. Just that mentoring role can be very valuable, and it's wisdom to be mentored. I thank God for the men that in ministry that mentored me, in music ministry especially, and it's just invaluable, and it gets very practical too.
However, don't think that everybody's open to being a mentor. I remember when I started as lead pastor, I was very young, 21, 22, something like that. And I called an Assemblies of God pastor in town and said, hey, this is Cecilio, and I just started pastoring the Spanish church here in Lowell AG Church. I'd love to get together with you and just learn from you. And the question, his question was, or his response was, why would you want to do that? And it was like a bucket of cold water was thrown on me. Here I am reaching out to someone I respected and had a highly opinion of, and what this person thought is, I don't want to waste my time with you, which was very sad, very sad. So if that happens, you just find somebody else.
Here's a potential way to avoid that, and I would say that I've had students come up to me like, I want you to mentor me. That can freak someone out. All right, it can scare people away. So one way to do that is like, hey, can I take you to coffee or can I take you to lunch? I have some questions. I just want to pick your brain about something. All right, don't let them know that they're mentoring you. Okay. Be sneaky, but in a good way. And then as things progress and as the relationship builds, then as you're led by the Spirit, begin to, ask the deeper questions, and then maybe even ask, can we make this more of a, and then commit to a year, commit to 18 months, or whatever it would be. And so you absolutely need mentorship in your life. That was something I struggled as a young pastor trying to find as well, trying to find someone that could give me help in the areas that I knew I was deficient in. But mentorship is certainly good and necessary. Start small, commit to a cup of coffee, to a hamburger at McDonald's or whatever it would be, and see what the Lord would lead you in. Why don't we stand? Let's thank our panel for an excellent discussion. Hebrews chapter 13, verses 20 and 21. May the God of peace, who through the blood of the eternal covenant brought back from the dead our Lord Jesus, that great shepherd of the sheep, equip you with every good thing for doing his will. And may he work in us what is pleasing in him through Jesus Christ, to whom be the glory forever and ever. Amen. God bless you. Take this conversation to the lunchroom and have a blessed day.